So as far as the kidnapping allegation goes, that stems from 2011. And what do we know that happens in 2011, specifically around December of that time frame? That is when we start to kind of get into the Kid Cudi and Cassie relationship. Obviously, a very huge talking point throughout a lot of this testimony, especially last week, kind of trickling into this week. And so around this 2011 time frame, Capricorn Clark is no longer Diddy's personal assistant. Now she's a global brand director. So she's around 28 years old around this time. But she said around this time frame, she was also working as Cassie's creative director and manager too, so kind of pulling those double roles. And she said as far as that role of being a creative director, it was kind of about maximizing the optics for Cassie. And so as far as just everything with the Kid Cudi incident, Capricorn Clark explained that Cassie was seeing Kid Cudi in December of 2011. We already know this, but Cassie had asked around this time frame whether or not Kid Cudi could come on a hike with Capricorn and Cassie. And Capricorn actually said that this was going to be a bad idea because Capricorn was concerned whether or not Diddy would find out about this. And so Capricorn was explaining that Diddy had bought her phone, and so he was worried, or she was worried about Diddy seeing these text messages come through from Cassie, kind of explaining that she wanted to bring Kid Cudi on this hike that they were doing together. And so Capricorn actually explained on the stand today that she was the one who brought Cassie in to buy that burner phone, so that way it wouldn't be traced back to Cassie. That way they could talk without Diddy finding out. So that was kind of a big revelation that we learned today, because Capricorn had explained that she got Cassie this burner phone, or she went with her to Best Buy to buy this burner phone because she was afraid that they would all get killed. There is an objection made by the defense, obviously, because everyone's just like, oh my God, this is now another time where Diddy allegedly threatened to kill either Capricorn Clark or Cassie or somebody in just that fashion. But the objection was sustained, so that part is struck from the record. But Capricorn said she all of a sudden was hearing a loud banging at her apartment. And so she said that she looked through the peephole of her apartment door and she saw that Diddy was upset. He was pacing. His body language looked like something was kind of in his hand. So Capricorn Clark opened the door, and she said when she did, Diddy was still upset. She explained everything that he wore, from a button-down shirt, a sweater, that he had slacks that just happened to be ripped. And she said it exposed his underwear. But she said that Diddy had a gun in his hand whenever he was banging on her door. And so Diddy said to Capricorn Clark in a very angry way, "Why didn't you tell me who is Scott?" And as we know Scott to be Scott Cudi, a.k.a. Kid Cudi. And so Diddy told Capricorn, "Get dressed. We're going to kill this N-word." And that's what she said. And I will say here, Jesse, that Capricorn Clark, when she was on the stand, I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as being casual, but as far as just profanity is concerned, she very much just kind of laid it all out there as far as what was said, what words were used. And so it did get a little profane during some aspects of her testimony. And so, yeah, Diddy had told her that they were going to go kill this person, and that person being Kid Cudi. And so during this testimony, I saw that Diddy was jotting down some notes during this. And so Capricorn said that she didn't want to go, but Diddy made her, and he put a gun in his waist, that same gun that he had in his hand, he put in his waist, and that Diddy still seemed mad, but this time mad at Capricorn. And Capricorn said that Diddy had never been to her house before, but once they were in the car, Diddy moved his gun from his waist to his lap now. But notably, Ruben, who we know as also Rue, but is also D-Rock's little brother, was the one who was driving the car. So it was the three of them, Capricorn, Diddy, and Ruben, aka Rue. And so Capricorn explained that she wasn't able to leave the Escalade, which I guess is the vehicle that they had driven down to. She said that everything was just happening so fast. There was no conversation going on. But they went from Capricorn Clark's home all the way down to Kid Cudi's house, or I guess all the way up to Kid Cudi's house in the Hollywood Hills. And then we're showing an exhibit photo of the Google map that shows kind of the direction of driving or direction of travel from Capricorn Clark's house to Kid Cudi's home. And then we see that same exhibit photo of Kid Cudi's front door. And so from there, Capricorn was kind of explaining she didn't know whether or not Kid Cudi was actually at his home, but Capricorn said that she had to stay in the car. Meanwhile, Ruben and Diddy went inside Kid Cudi's home. Capricorn explained that she had called Cassie and called Cassie's burner phone through all of this. And Capricorn had explained to Cassie, she said, "Cassie, what the F?" And she had told Cassie that she was brought to Kid Cudi's home essentially to be there so that way they could kill him. And Capricorn actually changed the name from Cassie's burner phone over to, like, I guess her best friend's name, because she didn't want Diddy to find out that she called her, to give her the heads up. But guess what happens next? Diddy comes out, and she said that while she was on the phone with Cassie, she could hear Kid Cudi on the phone telling Cassie that this man's in my house. Those weren't the exact words that were said, but you get what I'm going with that. But and Cassie was trying to stop him because he could have been killed in this incident, according to Capricorn Clark. Diddy comes out. Diddy explains, who the F are you talking to? Diddy called that same number back, found out that that's Cassie's burner phone, then got livid knowing Cassie even had this extra phone. And so Capricorn said that Kid Cudi later pulled up to his home. He sped off later, though, and then D-Rock, Capricorn, and Rue all followed him in the same car, chased him until they essentially lost him. But then the police responded, and that's when Kid Cudi, I guess, returns back to his home. And it's interesting because I don't recall under direct or even cross-examination that Kid Cudi explaining that he actually drove to the home before the police arrived. But according to Capricorn Clark, that's what she kind of said happened. But she surprisingly said that Diddy was relatively calm when he saw the police sirens going over to Kid Cudi's home, but that afterwards, Capricorn, Diddy, and Ruben all went to the Key Club, and Diddy told Capricorn to essentially call Cassie and tell her to come over here. And Cassie said, okay, well, come get me. So Diddy told Cassie to tell Kid Cudi not to tell the police that Diddy was the one allegedly behind it and not to make a police report about the incident. The Capricorn told Kid Cudi as well, too, not to file this police report, and that Kid Cudi was essentially mind blown. There was another objection. That objection was sustained, so maybe the mind blown won't be in the transcript. But after this event happened, and after this, because this was just them going into the home, that Capricorn and Cassie went over to Diddy's house, and Diddy began physically assaulting and being physically violent with Cassie. Capricorn explained that he kept kicking her and he never used his hands. Cassie was crouched into this fetal position.
Elizabeth, let me jump in because it's so loud right now. I know we got the sirens going on. This is the beauty of a live shot right outside the federal courthouse. But look, just from my point of view, look, this is really, really important testimony because it helps establish this alleged kidnapping. It helps to back up what Kid Cudi had testified to. It helps to describe and back up and corroborate with what Cassandra Ventura had testified to. All this idea that the jury has to believe that Sean Combs was essentially a mob boss, that he was running this criminal organization and had people engaging in this kind of behavior. And I'll pick it up back to you because the sound stopped. But, also real quick, she talked about her work. And she talked about being forced. I mean, if we're talking about forced labor, it wasn't just the hours. I mean, she talked about the hours she had to work as well, but also the kind of circumstances of her job too, right?
She did, and as I'm trying to go through my notes, everyone, that's also the beauty of the live shot, is writing or finding your place where you'd wrote down everything, because you write down so many notes, I should say. But yeah, as far as just the overworking that she did, she said on a good night she got 4 hours of sleep, and then on a bad night she got 2 hours of sleep. I personally think 4 hours of sleep is kind of a bad night, but according to her, that was just pretty typical. She said that she even got stress-induced alopecia from working with Diddy. She even had to go to a doctor. She said that around that time frame she was making about $65,000 as her salary as a personal assistant. But the thing is, Jesse, she went to HR, and HR calculated Capricorn's overtime, and she said that she had enough overtime that was owed to her, totaling about $80,000 of overtime. That's a lot of money. But what did Diddy do whenever he was shown kind of this paper receipt and kind of this document that showed that she was owed $80,000 in overtime? Diddy allegedly ripped up this paper. That's what Capricorn Clark said while she was on the stand. But like a lot of the other assistants that have testified so far, including, David James and George Kaplan as well, that Capricorn Clark's one of her many duties was to set up hotel rooms. And even just thinking about this time frame, right, Jesse, it's from 2004 to 2006. So this was before the Cassie relationship that she was still required to set up these hotels. She said that she would unpack a camera box. This camera box had a camera, lube, baby oil in it. She said that she had unpacked Diddy's clothes, his shoes, a toiletry bag, which a toiletry bag was that Louis Vuitton bag that allegedly had drugs inside of it. She said there were drugs like ecstasy inside this bag. Kind of still the same old tricks, it seems like, too, from just booking these hotel stays, that if it was one of Diddy's girlfriends, because again, this was before Cassie Ventura, that the name for the girlfriend would be Jackie Starr, a same alias that was used by Cassie. She had explained that as far as the names for the hotel reservations for Diddy specifically, she said that those could be either Frank Black, they could be Frank White. She even said that during some of these hotel stays that he being Diddy would stay at the hotel with Kim Porter, and this would be something that would happen at least once a week. But there were other girlfriends who would stay at the hotel too. And then even in the aftermath of everything, Jesse, it's kind of that same old thing where she would pack up all of his stuff and clean up after him. And what was kind of on the walls and kind of the stickier stuff that's found inside these hotel rooms, it was baby oil. So it was interesting kind of hearing that even before the Cassie Ventura relationship goes, that Capricorn Clark was essentially doing the same type of responsibilities that other assistants did while Diddy was with Cassie and even after the fact.
Right. Well, listen, we have a lot to break down with her testimony and what to make of it. But Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much for the in-depth report. It feels like I'm, reading the transcript. That's how detailed and thorough your reporting is on this. I know you have to jump back into the courtroom, but Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, so we're going to break this down, and we're also going to break down your questions. We see them all coming in right now. So I want to bring on my guests. I'm joined first by criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Great to have you here, Safa. And we are also joined by entertainment and employment attorney Cameron Dolachahi. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time. So a lot of questions to get into. I will start with you, Safa. We got this question that's coming in from D Princess. So Capricorn said she observed Diddy with guns. The government also has unmarked guns in evidence. What impact will this have on the RICO case, right? The racketeering conspiracy. Talk to us about this, Safa.
Going to have a significant impact on the RICO charges, because one of the things that the government has to prove is that there's an underlying predicate offense within a 10-year period to substantiate the RICO charge. The government last week had testimony with respect to the arson in Kid Cudi's vehicle, which is one of the predicate offenses that they would have to prove. Kidnapping is also another predicate offense they have to prove. So if the government can show that Mr. Combs used threats of force or physical violence by way of using a firearm, which is a significant threat of force and would cause someone to fear for their life, they can prove the kidnapping. And based on Capricorn Clark's testimony this morning, I think they're on a pretty good path to proving that.
I think the testimony, Cameron, about what the employees went through, what was required of them, even if you go back to one of these former assistants saying that it was Sean Combs' kingdom and we all did what he wanted, one of the things that she testified to is that she had to take a lie detector test. Capricorn Clark had to take a lie detector test. One of the questions is, Danny asks, why did Diddy make Capricorn take a lie detector test? Did she pass or fail? I think it might have had something to do with whether or not she stole jewelry. But, that's an important aspect of this case as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are people going under incredibly toxic conditions to work. They each probably have their own basis for separate lawsuits against them, from, unpaid wages to, like I mentioned, hostile work environment, to failure to prevent discrimination and retaliation. Living and working under those conditions, typically that, I represent plaintiffs, and those are the exact working conditions that lead to multiple lawsuits against the same employer. So, the testimony from the employees, it's not just one person saying it, multiple people corroborating the same work environment lends absolute credence to it.
So we also get questions in from, not just on YouTube, but we get emails. And there was one that struck us last week. I got to repeat it. I'm going to go to you, Safa. This is an email question from Jamie. I've been watching Law&Crime to keep me updated on the Diddy trial. Thank you all for the information. You're welcome. I've heard people on your show and others say that the prosecution's witnesses are providing testimony to show that Cassie was forced and coerced to comply with Diddy's sex fantasy demands in order to support sex trafficking charges. There are men who sexually, physically, financially, and emotionally abuse women using force, fraud, or coercion all the time. It seems that in order for Diddy's crimes to qualify for commercial sex trafficking, someone would have needed to purchase a victim, i.e. Cassie, from Diddy for the purpose of sex acts. It seems that is why Diddy's crimes wouldn't qualify for sex trafficking, because it's not commercial that we've heard of yet. Why isn't anyone talking about that? Am I missing something? And then there's also a tagline, also, still don't understand what RICO is. So, Saf, I'll give the floor to you. Is it about purchasing Cassie for sex trafficking? And also, if you want to give a real quick 4-sentence definition about what RICO is.
So really quickly, RICO is a racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organization, which essentially means that you have a criminal enterprise that engages in a pattern of behavior that would further that criminal enterprise. There's a few predicate offenses. Some of them include bribery, kidnapping, arson, other things like that. And essentially those would go to prove to further the enterprise, so to speak. So that is basically what a RICO is, first and foremost. Now, with respect to the sex trafficking charges here in the indictment, it's not that Cassie was the one that was purchased for sexual activity, but that they purchased sex workers, so to speak, in order to engage in sexual acts with Cassie, which is why the government had a number of male sex workers that testified with respect to, who they worked for, when they became engaged with Mr. Combs and Cassie Ventura, when they traveled or if they traveled from state to state, because there is a transportation and commerce component to that as well. So it's that Mr. Combs essentially purchased these sex or commercial sex workers, transported them via state lines or across state lines for the purposes of engaging in commercial sexual activity with Ms. Ventura.
Saf, I just want to follow up about one point on this. So we actually have a sidebar coming out later tonight about whether or not the prosecution at this point has proved sex trafficking. So I encourage everybody to check it out. But the reason I bring it up is one of the questions I posed there, I'm going to throw to you. Is it also commercial sex, whether or not, putting aside what was paid to these sex workers, if something of value was provided or promised to Cassandra Ventura, does that make it commercial sex? Is it only about the sex workers, or is it something of value, or whether it was gifts or trips or financial dependency or career promises? Is that commercial sex for sex trafficking?
To an extent, but more so you see it often with respect to the exchange of currency. Could gifts and things of that nature make a showing of commercial sex acts? Possibly. But again, with respect to these charges, I don't think that the government is proving exactly that Ms. Ventura was the person that was the basis for the commercial sex act,
Right.
but that these sex workers that were purchased through this company were the individuals that were commercially or they were the commercial sex workers. So I think it's really with respect to those individuals, which I think interestingly enough begs the question of this particular company, which seems to be a legitimized company, employing these sex workers for individuals to purchase.
I'm going to throw it over to you now, Cameron. By the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, am I mispronouncing your name? Is it Cameron or Cameron? I keep looking and I'm wondering if I'm saying it incorrectly.
Cameron, I'm a child of Iranian immigrants, so they spelled it quite an interesting way, but it's Cameron.
Oh, there you go. Okay, well, there you go, Cameron. So we got a question from Mikey John. Do you think Usher is on the witness list? He's known Diddy for a long time, even lived with him. I'm sure he must know something. And let me just couple that. Dawn Richard last week, I believe it was last week, testified that she observed Diddy punch Cassie in front of high-profile celebrities like Usher, which I have said goes to the idea of the power dynamic. So a big factor for the jury to consider is, why didn't Cassie leave? Why didn't she step forward? Why didn't she fight back? Why didn't she report Combs? Well, if that allegation is true and the jury accepts it, that he could beat her up in front of these people and nobody steps in, nobody does anything, that shows the power of Combs. What is she expected to do? Do you think Usher's going to be called to the stand?
Yeah, he absolutely could be. That's a great point. His testimony is absolutely relevant to show the domestic abuse, to show the forced nature of the relationship and the freak offs. So as high profile as he is, and maybe without this testimony, his lawyers could potentially put up some sort of a fight to avoid having him testify, because it is obviously burdensome and difficult at times. But I think it is absolutely relevant in this case. So we could definitely see him on the stand. I wouldn't be
Well,
surprised at all.
and the witness list is sealed, so we don't really know who's going to take the stand until it's announced at the end of the day. Oh, this person's going to be testifying tomorrow. That's kind of how we knew Capricorn Clark was going to testify today. And I'll just follow up another question for you, Cameron. This is from Sam K. Are there celebrities, like big name actors, going to testify?
I would think definitely. I think there's, this level of credibility that you have for a celebrity who has nothing to gain to come and testify. You saw that with Kate Moss in the Johnny Depp trial. And even Johnny Depp's attorney said Kate Moss has no reason to lie. She doesn't want to be here, right? So I think testimony from people like Kid Cudi, Usher, other celebrities where they really don't want to be there, and presumably are telling the truth because of that reason, are going to be really credible and impactful for the jury.
But for the prosecutor's point of view, you would also have to imagine, do they want it to get this far? Do they, they don't want to call like a J-Lo or a Justin Bieber, right, Cameron? Because then it just confuses what the case is about. It gets too, I think they're trying to be as specific as possible with who the victims are, who the escorts are, what the charges are. Because if you take every allegation against Sean Combs in the past 2 years from every civil lawsuit, putting aside the fact whether it's even relevant to the federal case, I don't think they want an expansive case like that.
Yes and no, and I think Safa could speak more intelligently about this, but usually prosecutors want to give as much evidence as possible and kind of almost beat a dead horse over and over, showing all the bad acts. They're presenting their case first. All that evidence comes in for the jury, and it's pretty impactful. So, I don't know if the prosecution, especially in this case, with the mountain of evidence that they have from the federal indictments and the raids, are going to say, okay, I think we have enough, and let's not confuse the jury. I think the jury, when they have enough bad facts and enough credible witnesses, they'll figure out a way on one of the charges to get a conviction.
I'll throw that to you, Safa, if you have an opinion about it.
Yeah, I would agree with Cameron. But not only that, I always think, and this is more of a style approach, is when you're telling the truth isn't complicated. So I don't think that you need, a bunch of witnesses to repeatedly tell the same thing. You want to get in, you want to get out, and you want to give impactful testimony for the jury to take away and consider. Now, it would be beneficial for the government to have these very notable people testify to the same thing, and, the jurors are humans. They are going to be fascinated by some of the people that come to testify in the witness stand, especially if you do have an Usher or J-Lo or somebody of that stature. But I don't think it's necessary with respect to the government's case. Not only that, I think with the domestic violence component, which essentially goes to show the threat of force and physical violence, I think we've heard quite a bit of testimony from Ms. Ventura herself, from Capricorn Clark, from Mr. Mascotti, and a bunch of other witnesses that would corroborate that. So I think the government's doing a pretty good job. They can certainly include some of these additional witnesses. I don't think it's actually necessary. But to Mr. Cameron's point, they're going to want to put as much as they can and throw the whole kitchen sink to get their conviction.
Saf, I want to follow up with another question. There's been a lot of talk about alleged victim number 3. Maybe can't find this person, not going to be able to testify. It was a big development leading into this trial. So we got a question from NLin93. And before I read this question, it presumes a lot and makes a lot of accusations. Just put it there. So NLin93 asks, is it okay, legal, for Diddy to pay off Gina to not testify? So assuming Gina is alleged victim number 3, and assuming that's what he did. And if so, will the prosecutors know before it's too late in this case? Safa?
That is 100% illegal. He cannot do that. That is witness tampering. That's bribery. He would be subject to new criminal charges if he were to do that. Could the government be informed that he did do this or allegedly do this prior to the end of trial? I'm sure, there's an interesting question as to why whoever victim number 3 is, why they didn't testify or why they have not testified as of yet, if they are still missing in action. And I do believe that victim 3 has an attorney. So it's interesting to see how their attorney is playing into this, because generally speaking, when us as defense attorneys, we have a client testify, we are in constant communication with that person. So the last thing I heard, which I'm not sure if it's true, was that the government had not heard from the witness or I believe it's her attorney, but we'll see, but that is illegal.
Yeah, and wait, we have no evidence to suggest that's what Diddy has done or allegedly did, which, by the way, Cameron, goes to another question we have from Nicole RZV. In high-profile cases like this, is it possible for the defense team to pay some witnesses to refuse to take the stand or to testify falsely?
Yeah, no. This would be
It's
incredibly
possible.
stupid.
It's possible,
Yeah,
but we
yes,
don't
you're
know.
right. You're right. It is absolutely possible. It would be one of the stupidest things for any lawyer to ever do, or for either party. So let's not anticipate anything like that happening.
Cameron, let me throw another question to you. This is from Psych Michael. Where is the evidence of RICO, meaning racketeering? We get it. He's a bad dude, but he's not on trial for that. Where is the RICO evidence?
Yeah, I think it's in all the employees working together. It's in Diddy forcing them to do what he wants. Him being, what you referred to earlier as a mob boss, and it's kind of what we call the spoken wheel conspiracy, where he's leading the charge, and everyone else is complying with everything he's doing, and they don't really have a choice. Whether they did have a choice or not is sort of actually irrelevant. But the point is that there's multiple people across states, across the country, helping him facilitate these illegal acts.
And Safa, let me follow that up. I mean, sure, there's different elements of it. There's different components. So it's racketeering conspiracy. So the more the employees will say, we know what the job was. It was to serve his interest. It was to benefit him. It was to benefit what he wanted. That goes to this kind of agreement. But isn't it true they could convict him of racketeering conspiracy without all of the freak-offs, without all of the sex trafficking? Because some of the underlying crimes can be separate and apart from that. Kidnapping, arson, bribery, the drug offenses. If the jury goes, I don't know if Cassandra Ventura was sex trafficked, but I think that there was crimes afoot. I think that Sean Combs was a part of this criminal organization. I think he had all of his employees doing his bidding, and we actually believe that he committed crime X, Y, and Z. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right, Jesse. And the government can do that. The jury can come back not guilty with respect to the sex trafficking charges, but they can come back guilty on the RICO charges. So they have everything the jurors are going to consider everything that's been placed before them at the trial. With respect to the RICO charge, again, taking sex trafficking aside, you have these underlying offenses, which people have testified to. There has been evidence that's been brought in to make at least a showing that these things did occur. So even if the jury is not going to consider, I don't really think this was sex trafficking, I don't think Ms. Ventura is a victim with respect to sex trafficking, they can still consider the RICO charge in and of itself and the underlying predicate offenses that have been independently proven to make a finding of guilty.
By the way, in about 5 minutes or so, they're going to come back. Obviously, there's no cameras in the courtroom. There's no audio equipment in the courtroom. But we're going to get live reporting once again, once there's a continuation of testimony. And once there is, we will report in real time what that testimony is, and we will break it down for you in real time, as well as take your questions in this case. So Cameron, got a question for you. This is from Vanessa. Do you think the lack of vocal support from celebrities is very telling to the jury? Nobody's come to Diddy's aid and defend him. Well, in all fairness, it hasn't gone to his side yet. His case hasn't started yet. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they realize it's a really tricky situation, and there's a lot of evidence against them. So their PR teams are pretty sophisticated, I would think, each celebrity, and they will say, absolutely do not touch this under any circumstance. Even if there is some support, that would not be a good idea. But it does also lend credence to the fact that some of these allegations are true, because if you had an overwhelming number of people saying, it wasn't, it would be hard for all these publicists and PR companies to be working, together to prevent that from getting out. I think the character and the conduct are coming to light.
We got a question here from Safa. Safa, did you put an own question from you to yourself? I hope you did. If not, we got another Safa here.
I did not.
Okay, yeah, I think you did. But no, Safa, got a question from you from Safa. Why are the accusations in the Lil Rod case not being discussed. It shows even more RICO. So just to provide a little context here, talking about Rodney, Lil Rod Jones, one of the first people to file a lawsuit against Sean Combs, I believe in February 2024. His former producer made a ton of accusations that he was basically assaulted by Combs, harassed by Combs, that he was groomed into homosexual sex for Combs, said he was a witness to violence, that he was sex trafficked. He alleged violations of the RICO laws. But I remember leading up to this case, there was a filing where the defense had said that the government's not going to be calling producer one. I made it the point at the time, I think that's Lil Rod. Maybe, I mean, if that's the truth, is that because what? That his allegations might not be relevant or they might be weak?
They definitely could be irrelevant. They definitely could be weak. I mean, I'm not too familiar with the lawsuit, but what I will say is there's probably some truth to it, and probably some things that may not be completely true. And the government is going to be very careful about who they pick as their witnesses. They want individuals who have, they're credible witnesses. They usually don't like to call people to testify. And I don't know what Mr. Rod, his background is, but individuals who have a heavy background or heavy criminal history, they want to stay away from individuals like that. I don't know if that's his case. I think that because he filed the civil suit as well, that gives him a motive to testify in a particular way, which the defense can certainly attack if he's on the stand. Now, again, if some of the things taken are true, could they be relevant? Absolutely. But does the government need to use him as a witness? Would they truly benefit in having him testify? They may not, so they've probably stayed away from him.
Yeah, and look, he showed up the first week of court. I think day one he showed up outside of court, I think probably in a moment of solidarity. But yeah, no indication right now he's going to testify. So also, besides the questions that we have up, we also have a poll up. Keep putting these polls up during the course of the case. So on YouTube, we had a question: do you believe the allegations of workplace abuse, unpaid overtime, threats against Combs? And get this, Cameron, 88% say yes, 12% say no. So when it comes to what the environment was like for these assistants, and we've heard a number of them so far, it seems the majority of people, at least on YouTube, believe him. We don't know what the jury believes, but that's quite telling, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to remember, jurors are usually employees. They're usually not employers. So they've either been part of an organization where maybe there was a hostile environment, or they've had bosses or employers who have treated them poorly. So they can commiserate, they can see when something's believable or not. And when multiple people are saying the same thing, we should believe them.
Great question from D Princess. It happened earlier today. There was a whole back and forth about DNA that might have been found on the car or in relation to the car, Kid Cudi's car being blown up. Again, if the jury accepts that, arson is one of the underlying crimes of racketeering. I'll throw it to you, Safa. This is a question from D Princess. The prosecutors don't seem to want the DNA results to the car being admitted into court. Why don't they think that is? This is about Kid Cudi's car. So just let me read you a little bit from the transcript, or a portion of the transcript from this morning. The judge said, "I see you burned the midnight oil over the weekend. What about the DNA questions?" Prosecutor says, "Investigator Jimenez's knowledge of this is extremely limited." The judge says, "But didn't he ask the serologist if any DNA test was done?" Prosecutor says, "But not the results." Prosecutor says, "Yes, there was a partial profile from the glass bottle in the car, but Investigator Jimenez does not know what that means." But there, and then the judge cut the prosecutor off. Cut the prosecutor off, saying, "You don't object to the report coming in, only what Mr. Agnifilo will ask." That's one of Sean Combs' defense attorneys. Prosecutor says, "We do object to the report coming in." Agnifilo responds, he got the results back. If the DNA came back with Sean Combs' DNA, this investigation would have gone in a different direction. But it was consistent with a female contributor. So then the judge followed up. So it's not whether the result was accurate, only the impact. And then the judge said, "I'm going to overrule the objection, but I'll hear you at sidebar after the direct, There's a little bit more back and forth on that. So it seems to me, Safa, right, there might be evidence to suggest that Sean Combs' DNA either wasn't on the car maybe not tying him to the arson, and maybe that's a problem for the prosecution. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely not going to look good for the prosecution. And in a perfect world, the prosecutors would love to have his DNA in that vehicle or on that Molotov cocktail. I don't think that kills their theory, though. There is testimony that we expect, or there's evidence that indicates that that DNA evidence was that of a woman. What woman or who, we don't know at this point in time, depending on if they were able to figure out whose DNA that was. If that person so happened to work for Mr. Combs and was doing that or created that Molotov cocktail, put it in the vehicle at his direction, then that's a win for the government. But it's not the greatest position for the government that it was a female's DNA. They, of course, would love for it to be Mr. Combs, but that's just not the case here.
Again, if you go back to the idea of how RICO used to be prosecuted, and you're talking about a mafia organization, you're not going to see the Don's fingerprints on the gun at all times.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the point. Got a question for you, Cameron. This is from Nest Dog. Do you think 50 Cent is going to testify?
I don't think so. I don't necessarily see the direct relevance there. I don't know how, the prosecution can use him effectively or more effectively than some other celebrities. And he's sort of.
Well, we know they have a rivalry, and it came up, I think, a little bit during Capricorn Clark's testimony today regarding like a rivalry between them.
Yeah, I don't know if that's enough. I think we talked earlier about kind of keeping the case a little tight. You do want evidence and you do want as many credible witnesses as possible. But, just on that minor point, I don't know if that's enough to bring in 50 Cent. It would, for my selfish reasons, I'd like the entertainment, though. I think it'd be kind of hilarious to have 50 Cent come in and then make his little meme posts about it.
The problem with him is he's been quite vocal about this case since it began.
Yeah, exactly. His credibility is not going to be great, and on cross, they're going to point that out pretty quickly.
I mean, he has not missed an opportunity to troll Diddy during the course of this whole case. We know there's bad blood between them. Let me throw a different question to you, Cameron. This is from Alexander Mateo. Will anyone testify on the alleged freak-offs at Diddy's parties? But there were people who testified about being part of the freak-offs, the escorts. I guess it's another celebrity question, right? Do you interpret that? Is that assuming that these freak-offs included people that weren't just the alleged victims and the alleged paid escorts, I guess other people who might have been a part of it?
Yeah, again, I don't think the prosecution needs it. I think it's pretty well documented. No one's denying it, even on Diddy's side, that there were these freak-offs. Whether they were at parties or not is a separate issue. But we don't know what kind of evidence was taken during the raids. Maybe there's camera footage of certain celebrities involved in those freak-offs. That would be obviously highly embarrassing and potentially damaging to those celebrities' careers. But at this point, I don't think the concept of whether the freak-offs happened or not is really in dispute.
Safa, go to you. We got a question from Creole Lady Lavu. Isn't it too late about this Kid Cudi stuff? I mean, there is a statute of limitations to press charges.
Well, there is a statute of limitations, but with respect to RICO, there's a broad net with respect to that, and we are within the statute of limitations for that. So maybe on the state side, arson charge for California statutory limitations, it may have expired. I'm not too familiar with the law over there, but it's fair game here in the RICO case.
By the way, they are officially back in court. So as we said, we're going to give you updates about what's happening and break it down in real time. There is a back and forth between the prosecutor and defense counsel. So the prosecutor says they propose to use communications between Miss Clark and Miss Ventura. We don't see any non-hearsay purpose. So I guess this is about how they're cross-examining Capricorn Clark, if I had to imagine. And the defense says, this is Mr. Agnifilo, there are logistics and photo shoots being discussed. She testified to this on direct. What are your takeaways from that back and forth? I know it's quite limited, Safa, but what should we be thinking about here?
What we're going to be thinking about is the impeachment of Capricorn Clark's credibility. So she's already testified. What the defense is going to get ready to do during the cross-examination is cross-examine her and elicit facts that are going to be beneficial to the defense. If there is something that she testified during direct examination that contradicts the defense's theory, or that the defense knows not to be true, then they will cross-examine her on that. And one of the things that I expect, based on what we've just discussed, is that they could use text messages between her and Miss Ventura to do that, to impeach her credibility and essentially show that she has not exactly been truthful in her testimony, and also to get more information out of her. A lot of times when the prosecutors have these witnesses come on the stand, the prosecution wants them to tell their own story that's favorable to the prosecution. But the defense has a story too, and I think that's what they're about to prepare for.
Cameron, question from Rel. Has the government come to an agreement with co-defendants?
I don't think so quite yet. I think the main target here is Diddy, right? So I think they want to see show the jury exactly how this conspiracy works, and then potentially prosecute the defendants as they come. So I don't think there's been a deal, but maybe some. We don't know how large this conspiracy is. There's internet conspiracy theories that this is some widespread racketeering organization. So we don't know that, but I think that'll be revealed in the next few weeks with more witnesses.
Well, so far, Safa, this also goes to another question that we have from one of our viewers, New Order of Kings. Where is the co-defendants for RICO? Some of the assistants were asked about a proffer agreement, about an immunity agreement, which is not surprising because how do you have a racketeering conspiracy criminal enterprise charge if he's doing it alone? They have to have worked out some sort of deals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Combs is solely charged in this indictment, so there are no co-defendants at this point, and there haven't been to this point. However, those individuals that work for that enterprise or work for Mr. Combs, the government has and had the power to charge them. They could have charged them as co-defendants with the contributions that they were making to further the enterprise. So setting up certain things with respect to the freak-offs, if that was what the government's theory was, or their participation in that, them doing threats of force or physical violence, the security and things of that nature. They certainly are a part of that RICO. They could have been charged. My guess is in exchange for their cooperation and testimony with the government has decided not to seek charges against them.
I've got a question here for you, Cameron, from Never Be. Do you feel that RICO has been proven so far?
I think so. I think there's, tiny points in cross-examination that maybe go to recollection of certain witnesses that might not be perfect. But I think generally what you're seeing is a organization run by Diddy. People are doing their work, forced to do it, to set up these criminal acts. I mean, one thing we haven't seen the defense really push back on, and it's almost admitted, is the transportation of drugs across state lines and in different places. I mean, it's almost known and admitted that he's using copious amounts of drugs and having people purchase them for him. So that's the least nefarious, predicate act for the racketeering charge, and it's almost a foregone conclusion.
So, okay, we have an update from court. This is from Mr. Agnifilo. So Combs' attorney says, again, I think this is how they plan to cross-examine Capricorn Clark or something of that nature. The direct went more negative than we expected. Their theory is that Miss Ventura was not permitted to be creative. The judge says in the future, in what you submit overnight, not really sure what that's about. I can't even provide any context on what that's about, so I'm not going to try to. But here's what I am going to do. Saf, I'm going to give you two questions that are quite similar. This is from Nestdog. How would you get DNA off of a Molotov cocktail? Fingerprints, sure, but DNA? And also from Nicole RZV, is it possible that the female DNA on Molotov cocktail belongs to Capricorn Clark? If it belongs to her, is she going to face charges?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. That is actually what came to my mind with respect to the Molotov cocktail is, could it be Capricorn Clark's, could that be her DNA? We know she was there to some extent, or we know that she was involved, although she was taken against her will, is what it sounds like. So that is a very fair possibility that it could have been her, could have been her DNA. Could she be charged? I doubt it, especially if she engaged in those activities with the threat of force or physical violence. So if she had a gun held to her head, or obviously she knew Mr. Combs had a weapon with him, he could have forced her to do it. So that's going to negate any intentional act of her doing it at her own free well. With respect to how to get the DNA off that Molotov cocktail, fires will oftentimes destroy DNA evidence. So what the government will do is they will try to get, fingerprint evidence if it is available. What they could also try to do is use a buccal swab if possible. So we'll see. We know
Okay.
that they've done something to some effect because they did confirm that the DNA belonged to a female. So,
And we believe that members of the Los Angeles Police Department and LA Fire Department are going to take the stand, and we might get a more in-depth understanding of what the investigation was into this apparent car bombing. Was there an actual car bombing? Does it support Kid Cudi's testimony? What was able to be found? So that's going to be important. Okay. Wow, we have a great super chat question from Notorious77. Thank you so much for your super chat question, your support. Because it's such a great question, I'm going to throw it to both of you. Cameron, I'll start with you. Do you think any rumors, and by the way, it's interesting because now I know why he might have gone with Notorious77. Do you think any rumors or accusations will be addressed about his involvement in Biggie and Tupac deaths? What do you think about that, Cameron?
Well, I'm a big '90s hip hop fan, so I would love for that to get addressed. That would solve a lot of mysteries and a lot of time. I know I've and others spent watching documentaries and doing our own sort of internet research. So I don't necessarily see how it's kind of a airtight situation for the prosecution. The prosecution doesn't want to take any risks, and going into kind of more theory would present some problems and maybe be a bit of a red herring for the jury. So I don't anticipate that, but it's clear that he had some sort of involvement. He's a violent person, and obviously he's hiring people to commit illegal acts on his behalf. So maybe the person that threw the Molotov cocktail in Kid Cudi's car is a part of an organization or part of the same type of people that committed these acts on Diddy's behalf and murdered these rappers. We don't know. I don't anticipate this case going that way, but again, selfishly for my own entertainment purposes, I would love for that to be addressed.
Safa, throw it to you.
yeah, I unfortunately don't think that any of those things would be relevant in this case. So I don't think that we're going to hear testimony about them. Although I know the world would love to hear it and would be waiting to see what, if anything, would be said about it. And you might be surprised, depending on who comes down the line next to testify. Could there be somebody that ultimately testifies and drops the bomb that Mr. Combs was involved in the death of Biggie Smalls or Tupac? Absolutely. But is it relevant with respect to this case? No, it's not.
Okay, Safa, I need you to make sense of what's happening in court here. So this, again, all goes back to, I think, how is the credibility of Cassandra Ventura going to be challenged? I'm not sure I quite follow this one, and if anybody knows, even my producers, please let me know. Judge says, in their defense submission over the weekend, the defense argued the album covered was relevant, right, Ms. Shapiro? Ms. Shapiro, Alexandra Shapiro, one of Combs' defense attorneys, says yes. Prosecutor says Ms. Ventura is topless with her arms crossed, so judge says, let's have Ms. Clark come back. I'm going to have our producers look into this because there might have been a filing and we want to just take a look at it, but why would an album cover of Cassandra Ventura be relevant to a case like this, Safa?
I don't know exactly.
Right.
One of the things that initially would come to mind is, depending on when the album cover was created and released, if there were any physical injuries or anything that was covered up or photoshopped with respect to her. If she had injuries during that time, not only that, but I think a lot of what we've heard about is testimony with regard to her career. Did she have the ability to make certain creative decisions is one of the things that has previously been brought up. So perhaps the defense might be taking the angle that, she just made the choice to display her own self pretty promiscuously on this particular album cover, that she did have creative control over this album cover, and that Mr. Combs wasn't as tightly.
Safa, I'll tell you what, I literally pulled it up like this because we have a great team and they have all the documents up quick. So let me just say what it reads. This is from one of the filings. This is from Sean Combs' counsel. It reads as follows. For instance, photographs showing Miss Ventura smiling at public events with Mr. Combs have evidentiary value independent of any testimony that Miss Ventura was happy at times or enjoyed particular events and activities during her relationship with Mr. Combs. Likewise, an album cover, or a photo from a modeling shoot will add a dimension not captured by oral testimony about the fact that Miss Ventura released an album or did modeling work. As the Supreme Court has explained, parties are permitted to present their case in a manner that tells a colorful story with descriptive richness, using testimony and exhibits that have evidentiary depth and communicate narrative integrity. So I guess it becomes a question, was she telling the truth about her being a victim of sex trafficking as this was going on, right? Am I understanding it correctly, Safa?
I think that, but I think also, what the defense is going to try to show is that, she was happy. They started off their opening statement saying, this is just a case of domestic violence. This is not a RICO. This is not a sex trafficking case. And domestic violence, unfortunately, happens between couples pretty frequently in this country. And so this was just that. There were happy times. There were bad times. Now we have evidence, and what the defense is going to say is this evidence with respect to her album cover or other events where they attended together as a couple and she appeared happy, are certainly relevant and go to the opposite, that, she was willingly in this relationship. She enjoyed this relationship, and what relationship doesn't have hard times? So I think that's where the defense is going with this. Not only that, but I do expect that they are probably going to say that Miss Ventura did have the ability to make money on her own with her modeling gigs outside of her singing career, and that she did somewhat have some creative control over her career.
Interesting. All right. Got a question. I've got a poll up. Which part of Capricorn Clark's testimony was most shocking to you? Remember, the former assistant who testified today. Alleged threats and intimidation, 20%. 50% being kidnapped. So the majority of people who polled found that to be the most shocking. 17% being forced to take a lie detector test. So didn't seem that ton of people were that surprised about that, Cameron. And witnessing violence against Cassie, 13%. You know, in a different kind of case, Cameron, if I said I could present a witness to you who's going to testify, I observed the victim being abused, that might be like 90% shocking testimony. But I guess it's because so many people have testified that they witnessed some form of abuse that for our audience, they're not shocked by it.
Yeah, it's almost like with the drug use, it's sort of a foregone conclusion and accepted that there was domestic abuse in this relationship. You have so many witnesses to it. You have so much descriptive evidence. Usually when allegations of abuse, or any allegations for that matter, are super specific, and in Cassie's case, they were in her lawsuit, that means they're credible. And so, it shows the polls sort of are nice, right? Because they show what a jury might be thinking. So if the jury is also thinking, it's a foregone conclusion that there's abuse here, that's really bad for Diddy.
Got a question from Soul Shadow. Since the government said they might finish early, how might that shift the defense's strategy or timeline? Could it backfire if they're underprepared? I'll throw that back to you, Cameron.
I don't think they are. I think, they have enough evidence, they have enough witnesses, they've gone above and beyond. And the points on cross that I've heard that, for example, with Kid Cudi, he says his house got robbed and they said, well, did you leave the door open? But that doesn't necessarily show that it wasn't Diddy. There's no other suspects. So, there's tiny points, little jabs possibly that the defense is throwing, but I think they're prosecution's landing some haymakers.
All right, got another question. I'll throw this to you, Safa. This is from Kay Morgan. Will the defense bring any of Diddy's family members to the stands? And that also, would be his children, right?
It's certainly possible. I would say anybody that testifies, they have to have relevant information with respect to the case. Could they call his children? Sure. Is it in good taste? Probably not. I probably would stay away from the kids, but it's certainly possible, especially if he has family members that he's worked with and it'll be interesting to see if he actually has any character witnesses testify on his behalf. Those witnesses may so happen to be family members or people that are very near and dear to him. I think, again, you should stay away from the kids, but it's possible he'll have some family testify.
Okay, we got an update from court. Judge, now let's bring the jury back in. The jury's entering. Sean Combs' defense counsel, Mark Agnifilo, is cross-examining Capricorn Clark. When he went into the park, it was to Tavern on the Green. Capricorn Clark responds, "We parked there earlier in the day in the park. We ran into Nas," who's a very famous rapper himself. And of course, this is, I believe, the start of her working relationship with Sean Combs. Got a question from Hedgehog the Fencer. What is the standard of proof for this case? Beyond reasonable doubt? Yes, beyond the reasonable doubt. Criminal case. That's what we're looking at here. Okay, question for you, Cameron. This is from Rel. Did the government lie about the amount of baby oil? So far, only showed 20 bottles seized in Miami. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head how many were found, but remember there were 2 properties that were ultimately searched. But I mean, they talk about thousands of bottles of baby oil. I don't remember if there was just 20. But what do you think? Do you think they were misrepresenting how much baby oil?
No, again, there's no reason to do that. That would be pretty stupid. And they raided multiple properties, and there's pictures that we're seeing here of so much baby oil. So I don't think it was circumscribed to just 20. Maybe there wasn't an exact count on the number, but an estimation of something like over 1,000. So that wouldn't be a lie if it's just an estimate.
Safa, over to you. Question from Enlin93. Does the furthering the enterprise in this case, so that's part of the RICO case, right? Everybody's working together to further the goals of the enterprise, a common purpose. Does the furthering the enterprise in this case translate to make Diddy happy? Because I guess unless he's selling the tapes on the dark web, it's not making him more money, right? I guess the question is, how is this helping him maybe financially, or what the situation is? Because it's not like he's making freak-off tapes, selling them, because in another kind of racketeering case, it would be making this illegal sex tapes for some sort of commercial profit. But is it to just make him happy? Is that enough for racketeering? Is that the furthering the enterprise?
Not enough. And that's going to be the interesting question here that the jurors are going to have to consider. And of course, we've got more time and more witnesses that we expect to testify in the coming weeks. But how has the enterprise been furthered? And there's no indication or testimony that I've at least learned of that would show that, there was any financial gain from anybody doing any of these activities. And we know that Mr. Combs and his bad boy enterprise, has been long-standing for decades at this point, and they've produced very high-profile singers and artists. So there's a means of them making money in that way. I don't know that it's based off of doing these freak-offs. So could it likely be just to make Mr. Combs happy? Is that enough? I don't think so.
We got an update from court. So Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, questioning Capricorn Clark. When you say he had Miss Ventura spin, who was there? Let me show you what you said, excuse me. You said Lorianne Gibson was there. Capricorn Clark responds, "They misheard me." Agnifilo says, "When did you first meet Cassie Ventura?" "I met her with Ryan Leslie." Now, as I'm listening to this, Cameron, raises a bigger question, right? How has the defense been doing at cross-examining these witnesses and striking at their credibility? Because there was testimony today regarding Capricorn Clark. She might have wanted to continue her work with Diddy, despite the fact that she claimed she didn't want to work there anymore. She was in this toxic environment. We saw a similar line of cross-examination earlier in the trial with other people who were around Diddy. So it does make you question, how effective have they been at cross-examining these witnesses?
I think they've done a great job. They don't have that much to work with, unfortunately, but they are excellent attorneys. I think they're doing a good job of poking, like I said earlier, little jabs. But when you're getting haymakers thrown at you, there's not really much you can do. I think the facts are the facts and the evidence is the evidence, and it's overwhelming. So it puts them really in a tough spot.
You say it's overwhelming, but I'll go to you, Safa. This question from Soul Shadow. Would a hung jury on RICO, but a conviction on lesser charges, be considered a win or a loss for the prosecution?
To be considered a loss for the prosecution. The prosecution is going to want a guilty verdict on each and every count of the indictment. In a perfect world, that's what they're looking for. In my opinion, it would be a loss if they didn't come, with a guilty verdict on the RICO. And all the time and the effort and the money that they put into prosecuting this case, I think also, would be a loss for them as well, but definitely a win for the defense.
Got a question here for you. Well, actually, it's not a question. It's more of a, let's read the report. Actually, let me go back to the reported testimony, and then I want your reaction to this, Cameron. So Mark Agnifilo, Sean Combs' defense attorney, asks Capricorn Clark, Diddy's former assistant, why'd you not get along with Cassie sometimes? She responds, in 2008, she got more bravado being his girlfriend the longer it lasted. She thought I was being paid to help her. And then the prosecutor objects. The judge said sustained, re-ask. That is an interesting line of testimony, because isn't it being built up maybe that Capricorn Clark, I don't know, are they trying to say was jealous? That she had issues with Cassie? That she had her own feelings towards Combs? I'm curious where you think they're going with that.
Yeah, or that Cassie was taking a role in everything that Diddy was doing. And it wasn't necessarily coerced, but now she feels this presence. She's a star. She's, the most important person in Diddy's life. And she can pretty much do everything. So in theory, she could leave Diddy if she wanted, but she's willing there. She's participating, and she's taking advantage of the employees herself.
Another update from court. This is for you, Safa. So Agnifilo says, what did you see? Capricorn Clark responds, she went from being a sweet model to being a feisty girlfriend. Agnifilo says, do you think she was talented? She had talent, was very beautiful, but not talented? She was not. I have good taste. Ooh, harsh. That was harsh. What do you think of that, Safa?
Very, very interesting. And I think what the defense is doing here, and they're doing a great job at it, is, and like what I said earlier, there's two sides to every story. The prosecution got to put Capricorn Clark on and elicit testimony in their favor. Now the defense has the opportunity to do the same. And what you're now hearing from the defense is this interesting relationship between Capricorn Clark and Cassie Ventura. Now, this was, of course, at the initial stages, and it seems like they may have gotten closer later. But I think what I'm hearing from this testimony is that Miss Ventura was not this meek sort of woman or victim throughout this time that she was with Mr. Combs, that she was feisty, she was fiery, she made decisions, she made demands, and things of that sort. So I think that the defense is eliciting that in order to make a showing that she wasn't just a victim here, that she made decisions on her own, that she, was feisty and things of that nature, which would negate, this idea that Mr. Combs was in so much control of her and her career.
Cameron, as we talk about final thoughts before we wrap things up, do you think the defense did, I mentioned about an effective job cross-examining other witnesses, do you think that they tarnished her credibility? Confronting her with a lot of her text messages between her and Combs about setting up freak-offs, encouraging them, what were her motivations? Do you think that her credibility has taken a hit?
I think it's taken a small hit. It's definitely not tarnished. Just to piggyback off of something Safa said earlier, absolutely agree with her that if one of the charges hung jury and, conviction on lesser charges, that's technically a win for the defense. But if Diddy has to spend significant amount of jail time, regardless of what charge he's convicted on, that's a loss. That's a major loss. Again, the defense only has so much to work with here. They are doing a great job, but I still don't think that they have enough to totally discredit these witnesses and support a defense verdict.
Interesting. All right, so Saf, I'll give you the final word. Who's winning this case right now as we're in week 3?
Oh, it's a tough call. I think that the prosecution is winning by just a smidge. I would say I don't know that they've established enough to make a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, because the government has to prove each and every single element of each and every offense. And I think that there are some significant questions that the jurors are going to have to ask themselves with respect to credibility. And, with the domestic violence, with the sex transactions, and all of those sorts of things. So the jurors are going to have to really ask some interesting questions. I think the prosecution is having a win today, at least to this point, establishing that Capricorn Clark appears to have been kidnapped. But we'll see. The defense isn't really too far behind, in my opinion.